Welcome, dear viewers, to the Ruslan Belov channel. This is your daily frontline review of the situation in Ukraine. Before we turn to the map, let's go over the latest news. According to Ukrainian sources, Russia is preparing Oreshnik missile strikes on Kyiv, Lviv, and Starokostiantiniv. Reports indicate that two fully armed missiles are currently stationed at the Kapustin Yar testing range, ready for immediate use. They are expected to be deployed either during the next large-scale missile strike or immediately following one. While Kyiv and Lviv require little explanation, Starokostiantiniv is this settlement here on the map. The strike will most likely target the airfield located in that area, situated on this particular section. Now, regarding Iranian-American negotiations. There are no real signs of any convergence between Tehran and Washington at this time. Yesterday, Iran presented its demands to the United States, demands that effectively amount to a call for unconditional American surrender. The full lifting of all existing sanctions, official recognition of Iran's right to uranium enrichment, payment of reparations, security guarantees against military aggression, and a number of additional conditions. It is perfectly clear that the United States will not accept these terms, just as Iran has no intention of complying with what Washington is demanding of it. Meanwhile, Trump's ultimatum is running out. Fewer than 24 hours remain before it expires. If Iran does not unblock the Strait of Hormuz, and it will not, the American side is threatening to destroy all of Iran's energy infrastructure and bridge crossings. Iran's response, however, seems entirely predictable. Such a move could set the entire region ablaze. In the meantime, combat operations on the front continue, and we continue to monitor their development. So, friends, over the past 24 hours, a number of positive advances were recorded on the Russian side, and on one particular sector, a truly significant territorial gain. However, on another sector, Russian forces suffered a setback. But let's go through everything in order. This is a packed episode overall. I recommend watching it through to the end. We'll begin with the zone of responsibility of the center grouping. Here, the armed forces of Ukraine have not stopped attempting to counterattack in the Hryshine area, and the reasons for this are quite clear. Hryshine is a large, sprawling village, and a firm consolidation there, followed by a build-up of forces, would force Ukrainian troops into retreat across multiple directions simultaneously, and a very considerable retreat at that. To the north, the only restraining line is Novoalexandrivka, while beyond it, for a distance of 6.5 kilometers, all the way to Mytyashev, there are no serious defensive positions whatsoever. To the northwest runs a chain of villages where an advance would admittedly be more difficult than to the north, but clinging to small settlements would still be extremely problematic for Ukrainian forces. The only place where they could mount serious resistance is to the west in the Serhivka area. And Serhivka is indeed a serious obstacle. As can be seen on the map, it is a sizable, well-fortified village, from which Ukrainian forces are currently launching what amounts to daily assaults in an attempt to recapture their lost positions in Hryshine. It is precisely for this reason that securing Hryshine requires taking Serhivka first, and that is where serious difficulties currently arise. Overall, the sector is promising, with breakthrough potential clearly visible, but at this stage it is essential to consolidate firmly and secure Russian positions in Hryshine. Moving on. Before transitioning to Russian successes near Doorilia, however, I should note that the AFU continues to conduct offensive actions from Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. All of their main achievements date back to February, and current activity is considerably more modest. For instance, the Ukrainian side announced the capture of Berezov, but over the past 2 days, 3 separate drone footage recordings have emerged showing Russian infantry present in the southern, central, and northern parts of that settlement, which unambiguously indicates that the village remains under full Russian control. Nevertheless, attack attempts continue. Yesterday's assault ended in a rather telling fashion. An entire assault group was destroyed right out in the open fields. Part of the personnel were killed on the spot, others were wounded, and only 3 managed to withdraw. One episode was captured on camera. A wounded Ukrainian soldier sat in the middle of a field, bleeding out and calling for help from his comrades, but they abandoned him and retreated to save their own lives. An FPV drone operator ended his suffering, Some will of course argue that finishing off wounded soldiers is impermissible, but the situation was what it was. His own people left him behind, and he would have inevitably died in agony. Now let's move to Doorilia. Here, a successful advance has been recorded north of the village of Novye Donbass, specifically in this area. As can be seen, we are talking about a Daka settlement, or more precisely, the Hernik Garden Cooperative. It is now fully under Russian control. It has not yet been marked as such on this particular map, for reasons I cannot explain, but on another pro-Russian map, the territory has already been colored accordingly. This means that Russian positions are now separated from the eastern outskirts of Doorilia by less than 2 kilometers. Let's even measure it on the map. Yes, less than 2 kilometers. What is needed for further success? An advance further north, at minimum to Kutuzivka, and ideally all the way to the Oblachny railway station. At that point, Doorilia would be firmly sealed off from the east, and it would become possible to begin enveloping the city from the north. An encirclement from the south is also needed, but that remains problematic for now. Still, following the capture of Hrychin, that task, if not resolved this month, will at least be actively pursued. I would not venture to give specific timelines, but I am more than confident that Ukrainian forces will lose Doorilia before the year is out. Now let's turn to the main advance of the past 24 hours. The most significant Russian forward movement took place on the Sloviansk axis. Fighters of the South grouping advanced along a front more than 7 kilometers wide, with the depth of the breakthrough being quite impressive. On one sector, 4.5 kilometers further south, approximately 4. Taken together, this is a very substantial result, and the total area of territory brought under control exceeds 20 square kilometers. A truly impressive figure. Particularly important is the fact that forested areas have been cleared, areas where, once the vegetation grows in, the enemy could have concentrated forces. The front line, as visible on the map, is approaching Rai Oleksandrivka from the east. Though the first houses are still quite some distance away, around 4 kilometers to the eastern outskirts. In addition, an advance was also recorded further north. There, fighters of the South grouping pushed forward more than 2 kilometers and reached the approaches to Veliki from the south. From the current positions, the first buildings of the village are less than 1 kilometer away, literally 700 to 800 meters. However, the terrain, as clearly visible on the map, is extremely unfavorable for the attacking side and, conversely, ideal for the defenders. Continuous elevation changes, chalk hills, and the like. A great deal of difficult and painstaking work therefore still lies ahead before the village passes to Russian control. Nevertheless, progress is evident, and it is very meaningful progress. As for Russian setbacks and losses, these occurred on the Zaporizhzhia axis. There, the AFU launched a counterattack in the Novoyakovlivka area and reclaimed control of the village. The original Russian foothold there was extremely weak, and in my view, declaring control over that settlement was premature, hence the predictable counterattack that followed. As for those claiming that the AFU also recaptured Stepnohirsk, I have heard such rumors and have received questions about it in direct messages. Let me state categorically, that is complete nonsense. Stepnohirsk is under full Russian control. That said, the number of offensive actions from the Ukrainian side has indeed noticeably increased. One might even say significantly increased, and that is a fact. The situation therefore remains tense, and how it develops further will become clear in the near term. From Kupansk today, only informational updates are coming in. I have also updated the map coloring north of Kupansk. That section of the line of contact is under AFU control. Yesterday we discussed how Ukrainian servicemen were captured south of Holubivka, and how AFU fighters came under Russian fire at another specific point. All of this indicates that Russian forces do not control the entire territory in question. It is held by Ukrainian forces. Reports also speak of intense combat operations, while Russian troops continue to hold the central, more precisely, the northern, part of Kupansk. Active engagements continue in the vicinity of Kupansk, Vuzlovyi, and Kurilivka. Reports also mention an expansion of the Russian-controlled zone and a strengthening of positions around Pishchane. Russian forces are improving their footing there, and are reportedly advancing toward Novusinov. I will remind you, however, that it was in Novusinov that Russian servicemen were previously taken prisoner. Earlier reports suggested that this settlement had passed to Russian control, but that information was not confirmed. It remains under AFU control. As of today, there are no significant changes here. Moving to the Veliki-Burluc axis, reports from this direction indicate changes in favor of both sides. As previously reported, Russian forces were expanding control to the west of Kamyanka toward Kolodezne. I reflected this on the map accordingly. Today, reports once again describe an expansion of Russian positions in the area of Dvorichanske in the direction of that same Kolodezne. At the same time, the map also shows changes in Ukraine's favor. Amban was previously colored as being under Russian control, but the settlement has now passed to Ukrainian forces and is no longer controlled by Russian troops. Reports also mention AFU counteroffensive operations in the direction of Malv. All territory marked in yellow, including the forested areas, is currently under Ukrainian military control. Thus, Ukrainian forces have made some limited gains here. Moving to Vauvchansk. From this axis, only news updates are coming in. Reports describe active combat engagements, with Russian forces improving positions and expanding the controlled zone by an average of 100 meters along the line of contact. Information has also arrived that on the Lipsy axis, the AFU attempted to counterattack. It is not yet clear in which direction exactly, toward Lukiantsy or toward Hlybok. But the counterattack itself has been confirmed. Russian sources, however, report that all assault groups were destroyed. Overall, no meaningful changes on this sector. Moving to the Sumy axis. Reports from here are also primarily informational in nature. At this point in time, Russian forces are expanding the controlled zone at various sections of the line of contact by up to 300 meters. Advances are occurring, though modest ones. Movement has been recorded near Sopish, Potapivka, and Malakorchakovka. Malakorchakovka reportedly passed to Russian control earlier. I have completed the map coloring to reflect full Russian control there. Some sources report active assault operations in Korchakovka itself, though how accurate that information is remains unclear for now. Expansion of Russian positions in the Yunikivka area also continues, though reports of this nature arrive from there almost daily without any confirmatory documentation. Additionally, reports describe an expansion of Russian control near Vysoke, Pokrovka, and Popivka, summarizing the past 24 hours. One settlement and approximately 3 square kilometers of territory passed to AFU control, while Russian forces took control of approximately 24 square kilometers. That is the overall picture of the frontline situation for the day. Now let us turn to the second conflict. Last week, approximately 400 kilometers from the Iranian-Iraqi border, near Isfahan, an American F-15 fighter jet was shot down by Iranian air defense. The event is noteworthy in itself, given that Americans had previously lost 3 aircraft of this type, though those were shot down over Kuwait by a heroic Kuwaiti pilot. The present case, however, is the work of Iranian air defense. The aircraft went down, the pilots ejected, and the American side immediately launched a search and rescue operation. The Iranians, in turn, attempted to locate the pilots and take them prisoner. Ultimately, the pilots were evacuated. The American side declared them safe, though the pilots themselves were never publicly shown. The identities of the crew remain unclear. According to some reports, one of them was a U.S. Air Force colonel, which would explain the scale and intensity of the rescue operation mounted on their behalf. However, despite its apparent success, the pilots were, in all likelihood, genuinely rescued. The entire operation turned into a veritable graveyard of American aviation hardware. Beyond the F-15 lost in combat, during the rescue operation itself, the Americans also lost 2 specialized C-130 Hercules transport aircraft used by Special Operations Forces for search and rescue missions. Simultaneously, an American A-10 ground attack aircraft was shot down over the Strait of Hormuz. At least 1 Black Hawk helicopter involved in the rescue was seriously damaged. In addition, 2 light helicopters used by Special Forces for precision operations were also hit. Iranian media gleefully circulated images of the temporary airfield the Americans had established to support the rescue operation. The entire area was strewn with the burned wreckage of aviation hardware. On one hand, there was a definite measure of success. The pilots were pulled out. On the other hand, if every such rescue operation comes at the cost of losses on this scale, no air force will prove sufficient, not even the largest in the world, that of the United States. But that is not the main point. Immediately following the operation, Trump flew into a rage and began issuing one harsh statement after another. He demanded that Iran open the Strait of Hormuz immediately, by Wednesday, otherwise threatening to bomb all Iranian bridges and power plants. In doing so, he dispensed with diplomatic language in his Truth Social posts. "Open that damn strait, or you're all going to hell." His use of the phrase, "praise Allah," in that same context, could well be interpreted as blasphemy, an affront to the beliefs of the faithful. So, Trump is threatening to bomb Iran back to the Stone Age. Tehran openly dismisses these threats and declares it has no fear. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, meanwhile, has announced the introduction of a new navigation regime in the Strait of Hormuz. As I have noted many times in previous episodes, all countries of the world have been divided into three categories: those friendly to Iran, whose vessels pass through the strait freely and without charge; those that are neutral, who pay a fee for passage; and those that are hostile, meaning vessels affiliated with the United States, Israel, and their allies, for whom the strait is closed entirely. This is how Iran intends to replenish its treasury. What is most noteworthy, however, is this: Donald Trump, while continuing to threaten Iranian infrastructure, simultaneously claims to be conducting negotiations with some Iranian leadership. I have pointed this out many times on our Filipovsky 13 channel. Trump stubbornly continues to negotiate with some mythical representatives of Iranian authority. What is more, yesterday he declared that some kind of deal could be signed as early as today, Monday. That is, a peace agreement could be concluded literally today or tomorrow. Israeli media, for their part, are engaged in information operations, reporting on alleged agreements reached in Islamabad for a 45-day ceasefire. It remains entirely unclear, however, with whom exactly the Americans were negotiating in the Pakistani capital, since Iran categorically denies any participation in talks in Islamabad. What is known is that meetings were held there involving the foreign ministers of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt, but without Iran itself. It has also emerged that Trump's special envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, left certain messages for Tehran in Islamabad. The Iranians collected them, but provided no response. Thus, according to Trump, negotiations are underway. According to Iran, they do not exist at all. Trump is threatening a total infrastructure war against Tehran, yet has not moved to implement it, instead demanding in ultimatum form that the Strait of Hormuz be opened. In my view, Trump now stands at a fundamental crossroads. Either find a way to extract himself from the Middle Eastern quagmire with minimal damage, or sharply escalate, possibly even to the point of employing nuclear weapons, though that is, of course, an extreme measure. What Trump will ultimately choose will become clear in the coming weeks. It should also be noted that a visit by the American president to Beijing is scheduled for approximately mid-May. By that point, he will need to demonstrate some tangible result in this war, and none is currently in sight. Trump is therefore frantically searching for a way out of the trap that he himself largely created, or rather that was created for him by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Hegseth carries little of the blame, but Marco Rubio, a man who presents himself as an intellectual, apparently decided that nothing was beyond his reach. Venezuela seemed to confirm that sense of invincibility, but Iran, as it turned out, is an entirely different matter.